Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to accelerate their business and grow their team. I'm here today with Clayton Mitchell. Clayton, why don't you introduce yourself?
Clayton Mitchell. I am the principal with Mitchell White Advisors, a small boutique strategic capital program development and execution advisory services. We also provide advisory services in real estate and built the competencies for venture through 25 years as a Navy civil engineer corps officer, retired 7.5 years with Kaiser Permanente, large health system based on the West Coast. And most recently, senior vice president of real estate and facilities for Thomas Jefferson University in Jefferson Health. 18 hospital, 18 million square foot health system in the Philadelphia, South New Jersey.
Awesome. Thank you for your service. Sounds like there was some service in there. And even though you're in a small boutique, small things come in, great things come in small packages.
Absolutely.
What tech trends significantly impacted your industry and how has your company responded, or how have you responded?
Yeah, I believe that the biggest tech, going back to my roots in real estate and facilities and this concept of smart buildings, a lot of times we think of smart buildings as just a nice attribute to have, getting all the bells and whistles on a car. But I believe that if we progress, the more we begin to understand that smart buildings are going to be necessary for a variety of reasons to help promote sustainability, at this force multipliers for staff, which are increasingly more difficult to recruit. And I've been in an industry long enough to, for example, in HVAC controls, went from pneumatic, where we were using air to push controls, to analog, to now digital. And so that transformation we see there, the move from buying applications and working to integrate them yourselves to software as a service, those are things that I think are going to continue to revolutionize my industry and make it more efficient. Like I talked about real estate facilities, but my focus really the last 15 to 20 years has been in healthcare. And as we know, healthcare is an incredibly inexpensive endeavor. And so everything that we can do to begin to reduce the operating expense of delivering those services can have a material impact on the way forward. And so on the real estate facility side, it's really how do we extract those costs out of the overall expense of healthcare from a real estate and facility standpoint? And I think technology is not the key answer.
What are 3 technology innovations you guys are betting on to drive your business growth?
It might sound cliche, but AI is definitely at the top of the list. The movement into the use of technology to help us manage the data and the tremendous amount of data that's generated, and just even your most basic health systems, relying on staff to sort through that and troubleshoot and become more predictive is a significant challenge. And then moving from AI, I'll package the technology under the hubris of smart buildings. So as we begin to look at things like climate change, so we look at things like market competition and brand and maintaining those over time. It's incredibly important to layer technologies into your buildings. They actually, in a sense, become self-healing. They actually don't need human interaction to react to situations. Maybe it may be climate, it may be occupancy, it may be productivity. It may be sensing when a person that is on the spectrum of autism needs certain type of lightings, needs certain types of colors to help put them at ease. And so that the building can recognize who's coming in and what the needs of that person are from a wayfinding standpoint, productivity standpoint, and the like.
Yeah, that's really cool. We've been implementing a lot of AI solutions for clients. I'm just interested in a particular use case that has changed the way that you do something.
The- I think I've been really focused on building systems integration, moving from managing buildings as nodes, and for larger systems, having a more integrated approach to that. And so that requires the establishment of what we call military network operation centers. You can leverage a small cadre of talented people to have line of sight over the entire portfolio operations. If you visited the network operations center of a Microsoft or some of the larger global firms, they have a room where there's a bunch of really smart people sitting there monitoring what's going on across the entire enterprise. Companies like Walmart can tell you when a freezer door is open in one of the stores. And so I think that level of line of sight, and I believe the technologies are here to do that. I think the bigger challenge is the integration of those technologies. I just see a greater proliferation of systems and integrated approach to layering technology to better understand how your organization or your business is operating going into the future.
That's a great transition to my next question, which what are some of the more significant gaps between your digital ambitions and the realities today?
I think the biggest gap is as leaders, we're often want to jump right to the solution from what we think may be the cause or the enabler of that solution, and not understand that to deploy technology and deploy innovation requires a great depth of planning. Our advising services practice under NWA really focuses on how do we fill that gap? And we think about it in terms of the center of excellence. In any complex system or organization, you need strong governance, first off. What's the vision? What's the strategy to achieve the vision? What are the guiding principles that are going to inform our decisions? How do we make those decisions? How do we structure and organize ourselves to do that? If you don't understand those, I think you're going to be handicapped in trying to deploy technology to solve your problems. And from there, there's standardized processes. If you have variable processes throughout the ecosystem, you're going to run into challenges in deploying a technology to solve that problem. And I'm a really good example of that. I think the third pillar would be workforce development. Oftentimes we're attempting to deploy technology within a workforce that just hasn't been prepared for. The base preparation is strong governance and standardized processes, but there are also different thought processes you have to have for the people that are actually going to utilize that technology, which means as you hire going forward, you may need to think about those attributes to better operate your plan and framework that may not be there today. For example, I employed a lot of building technicians. They were really strong with the wrenches, mechanically strong, but tomorrow I may need them to be more data savvy. They certainly can't be afraid of a computer, and they have to think more in a more system approach rather than a point approach. I think that the other three pillars that we focus on are digital transformation and the core of the answers. How do you affect a digital transformation into a 2B model, future-centric model of how you want to operate as a business? The fifth pillar for us is strategic sourcing. Maybe we don't need to do everything, all right? From a technology standpoint, if we don't need to do everything and we're outsourcing elements of it, how well are those strategic partners integrated with access to the systems that we use? And I think the final pillar is more about culture. We oftentimes try to attack culture directly, but from our standpoint, if you hit those first five pillars, you got a good chance of shifting or influencing the culture. Ultimately, culture is dependent in my mind on the leaders. Organizations take on the attributes of the leader. I think two attributes that are very key in shifting culture are curiosity and empathy. Taken all together, that's the framework that we use to help entities establish centers of excellence. A subset of the establishment of those centers of excellence is creating an environment that facilitates the deployment of technologies that can bring even greater efficiencies.
What's the biggest challenge to maintaining a competitive edge in your industry?
I just think it's just infusing as a key attribute, not only in the leaders, but in the people that you place around you. I talked about that framework structure, strong governance and strong processes. When you talk about those people, you're limiting our ability to be creative. No, creating more time for you to be creative. Those pillars and attributes are about it's a standard operating framework that allows us to get our day-to-day business like this. 75 to 80% of things that we just got to do. But I've got that 20% left to think creatively. And I think one of the biggest hurdles that we have is if our leadership doesn't have, they may have a vision, but if they don't understand the steps necessary to implement that vision at scale, then we have a challenge.
Yeah, I totally agree. You've given me a lot to dig in on, but I'm going to wait 2 questions from now to dig in. How do you approach risk when you're implementing something new?
I think first off, you have to have a really good understanding of what are catastrophic risks, and what I'll call tolerable risks.
Yeah.
And
In running, we call it niggles. When you run and something hurts a little bit, it's a little uncomfortable. I've started to adopt this term like, oh yeah, I have a niggle in my Achilles. It's not ruptured. It's not torn. I just have a niggle. And yeah, you got to know what's a niggle. Change is uncomfortable. Are we talking about risks that are just something to keep an eye on, or are these risks that we need to try to prevent those negative outcomes? Love it.
And again, I'm coming from a lot of my perspective in the military. A plan is only a point of departure, right? Very few plants survive first contact. And so when they don't survive first contact, I believe as the leader, and this is where experience comes into play, you have to understand what are those catastrophic failures. Hey, is it a legal issue? Is it a compliance issue or regulatory issue? Is it something that can get somebody put in jail or get somebody hurt, somebody killed, or make us lose a lot of money? As the leader, I have to be aware of where those risks are. I don't know that you want to take every risk of the equation, because you want a workforce that takes prudent risks. Prudent and calculated risks requires a lot of interaction with the team to understand the various capabilities. Some of the most powerful lessons I've been able to learn and benefit from were created by, and just real quick story there. We were building a pad for a radar tracking station, and on a remote island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Supply chain, we were at the very end of the supply chain. So if we broke something, we weren't going to get that replacement part for weeks, if not months. And my team installed this pipe acting as a culvert. Basically, a truck drives over it to get to the pad, to service the pad, and things of that sort. And I looked at it and it's like, I don't know if that pipe's deep enough. It is deep enough. So we did the calculations. Yeah, we did the calculations. It was really arguing that this thing's going to work. So got to the point where I was like, I don't know that I'm going to win this argument with these guys. So I pivoted and said, hey, let me ask you this. Do you have another pipe just like that? If that pipe got crushed, is there another pipe that we can just bring in? Yeah, right over there. And I put eyes on it. Okay. Drive the truck across it. And then drove the truck across it. Crunch. It failed. That failure, and I was a 26-year-old Lieutenant JG at the time with a bunch of old guys with me and junior guys. That failure gave me so much credibility. Sometimes there are places where you can take failure and leverage it as a teachable moment. We have to be cognizant of those teachable moments and where the real learning in workforces occur. Tolerance for failure perspective does not facilitate learning as much as we might.
A lot of my IT friends will be warning folks about security vulnerabilities or things that need to be cleaned up. What gives us a lot of leverage is the outages or the security incidents. They become like, yeah, that's why we have this list of stuff that we just haven't been able to budget in. Security budgets tend to go up right after the security incident.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So totally agree with that. That's great. This is where I want to dig in a little bit. You've mentioned operating frameworks, and I really liked your approach there. What advice can we discuss in terms of connecting your technology roadmap with your overall business strategy? This is where I like to see how people plan. You've talked a lot about it. Yeah. What advice can you share about connecting your roadmap? Most of the time, it's not just a technology roadmap. Technology is just a specific kind of changes that you're making, but you have a set of changes or things you want to implement, and then you have to plan that out. What's your approach to that?
Yeah, I'm going to use an architect anecdote of form follows function. When we really haven't thought deeply about the function, it's difficult to build form around it. Whether you're talking about physical form from real estate and facility standpoint, where you're talking about a technological form, you're trying to layer technology to better enable operations. If leadership hasn't solidified their vision, codified that vision in a strategy or set of strategies to enable it, and then really begin to lay out the framework for how that occurs, then there are challenges for me. And again, a lot of my advisory services work lies in the area of strategic capital program development, which is really all about the vision of your organization. What are the strategies or guiding principles that you feel you need to enable that vision? Let's solve as many of those upfront in concept development, right? And then we can develop standards and guidelines that can inform all of the key stakeholders as they're putting their projects together. They understand upfront what elements is it ESG? Are we worried? Are we looking to decarbonize? Whatever those guiding principles may be, they can be incorporated into the work streams and the work plans necessary to execute. From a strategic execution standpoint, the gap that I see is it's easy to sit in a boardroom or a C-suite to come up with the idea, but if you haven't built infrastructure of people, talented people to help you with that, with the evolution of those strategies into actionable projects, then you're challenged. And so what we tend to do is try to dual hat people. So we've got people with day jobs and we pull them out of their day jobs, put them on special projects, and we're having them put together the requirements. How are they putting together requirements? Based on how they're doing things today. But you really need people, and now I'm going to shift into our healthcare model. I want people putting those owner project requirements and those project requirements together based on how we think we're going to be delivering in 5 to 10 years, not how we're delivering today. How we're delivering today, in many cases, may be obsolete. And so we constantly, there's a saying, if you only do what you've always done, you only get what you've always got. If you're using people, plan your requirements for strategic deployment of whatever the strategy may be, whatever the project may be, but they're today-centric people, not future-centric people, then you're going to get more of the same. As we're thinking about the future, and nobody has a crystal ball for sure, but you're building in flexibility. You're building in resilience. You're building in those things that allow you to flex as the project goes forward. And CBs, maybe CBs, I had an ops chief that used to say, adapt, improvise, and overcome. That's what you've got to do. You're never going to get to that 100% plan that's going to solve every problem in the 10-year time frame, but you can get to a 70%. If you can get comfortable making 70 to 75% decisions that allow you the flexibility to pivot, then I think we got a really good shot at building organizations that can evolve and they're resilient enough to survive black swan events like the pandemic, like Katrina.
Right.
I've seen organizations do that, but it takes some deep planning.
Is there a particular framework or methodology that you use when you walk into the proverbial disorganized, no vision, we're falling all over ourselves? There's a lot of passion and machismo for hitting a certain objective, but is there a framework you use or how do you like to rein that in?
I love that question. I get called typically when someone is concerned about their ability to deliver a major capital project, 2.5, 3, 1 billion, whatever. That's been my MO over the past 13, 14 years. One of my employers said, hey, look, you need to put a secret sauce around that so we can deploy it everywhere. That's where we came up with the 5, sometimes 6 pillar framework. Let's come in and really assess the governance. How are decisions being made? How did you decide that you needed to do this? And how does that align with the strategy that you're trying to implement in the future as well as at scale? What are your standardized processes? What are the processes that everybody understands in terms of how to deliver that vision? Let's do an assessment of your workforce. And in that sense, I have here are today's attributes, here's tomorrow's attributes. And so I'm looking at, hey, where is that workforce in general? Maybe there's a couple people in a tomorrow deal, but I can guarantee you in a lot of places I'm looking, they're all in a today model. What technologies have you already invested in? Are they integrated? Do you have single source of truth data? And if you do, where's that data stored? How do you access it? How's it policed? The 5th pillar, we look at strategic sourcing. It's really, how are you selecting your strategic partners? Are you being clear? Are you giving them great clarity and what you actually need? Because I believe that becomes a huge opportunity with a lot of organizations. They think they're asking for something, but their contracts, the guidance that they're given to their strategic partner doesn't align with what they think they want. And then we look at culture, but we're actually just looking for markers in the culture. Our focus is really on those first 5 pillars. Our premise is that if we can bring greater structure there, then there's a chance to influence some of that culture to the extent that the leaders are aligned with the type of culture they want. So a lot of times we don't get the culture that we desire because we've not even taken any time to think about it. And so back to your point, when there is that churn, there's usually some cultural issue at the core of why that churn's occurring. But you have to go through, I would say, some more objective assessments before you can really address some of the truly subjective issues that organization maybe have.
How do you cultivate a culture of innovation and fluency in an organization?
Man, that's a great question, Ben. I think for me, think of it as that you've got a coloring book. Remember, we used to color the dots.
Sure.
Right. So as the leader, you're drawing a picture with the dots, right? You got a general idea of where you want to go. I don't put all the dots in place. I have enough dots that it generally looks like, okay, that's where I want to go. And then I allow my team to contribute and filling in some of those dots and some of the colors. One of the things I'm proudest of is I went to an organization, there were 6 vice presidents there. We went through a complete transformation. You asked anybody, do these guys do business anywhere close to the way they started? And they were like, no. And it is much better. The thing I'm most proud of is the 6 VPs that were there when I got there were the 6 VPs that were there when I left. So sometimes we think we have to clean house, but if you let them color it in a little bit and shape the perspective. Another example I'll use is I'm big on PMOs. right? Because I think most organizations are set up to operate tactically. And so they're in silos as they're operating tactically. And if you don't want to go through a overarching reorganization and then really trying to analyze roles, responsibilities, and things of that sort, the quickest way to get movement is to establish a PMO that acts as an integrator and begins to bring those silos together. I'm talking to one of the VPs that I thought would be really good to lead the PMO. And he heard what we wanted to do. He's like, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Okay, I get it. But could I use some of your brain power to at least let me use you to put together the position description for this PMO? Could you do that? And he goes, yeah, I'll do that. So we have a series of meetings. About the third meeting, he comes in, different work on his space. He's, Mitch, this PMO, this is actually going to be the quarterback for this place. Too bad you weren't interested in it. He goes, I think I am interested in him. And we made him the PMO, right? So that's taken somebody who was totally obstinate about that function. And so, okay, I get it. But let you help me think through this. And he comes.
That's cool. What a great story. Can you share some experience or some advice with peers who are just beginning their career journey or their digital transformation journey?
Yeah, a couple of things that I did when I was about 25 years old that really helped me out right now. Before I decided I was going to get the name, 25 years old, thinking about my 50-year-old self and what type of leader I want to be when I'm 50. And I decided to pick 3 words to describe that. I love teachers. And so my parents are teachers, a lot of teachers in my family. So I patterned it off the best teachers I had learned from as the framework for what type of leader I wanted to be. And so the first thing was visionary. I loved visionary teachers. I loved teachers that could help me understand where the future was headed. So as an attribute, I wanted to be a visionary. I love teachers that were just great communicators and had great stories. And so I said, yeah, I want to communicator. I want to be a great communicator. That's the second attribute. And people that go to the military tend to come back with C stories. So I can do 4 years in the military, get some C stories. The 4 years turned to 25, but is what it is. And then the last thing was about character. When I coach, I also am working towards an executive coaching certification. In my mentoring practice and first coaching, I usually ask people to sit down and define how you view your future self, how you want to be viewed, and what type of leader you want to be. Don't make it complicated initially. Just boil it down to 3 attributes. I was thinking I was going to take those 3 attributes, I'd perfect them, and I pick 3 other attributes and perfect them. And here we are 30 some odd years later, and I'm still working on vision, communication, character. And coaching people, particularly who want to go to the executive level, you need to define yourself and who you want to be and what you want to represent before you allow other people to define yourself. And that was great advice that I was given early. Having those 3 things that define you, that you've defined yourself, I think helps you in that down that street.
Yeah, I totally agree. Mine are loving, disciplined, and powerful. Those are my 3. I want to be a lover of people. I want people to see that. I want to be a giver, not a taker. Disciplined is the man you have to pay every day. And then powerful used to interrupt my sentences. I would think of being powerful. I wouldn't be able to finish my sentence because it used to just mess me up what it means to be a powerful person. And I'm still working on all 3 of those things. I love that. And I think at the root of that is this idea of being versus doing. We're human beings, not human doings. And many people are doing success. So I'm going to do all these things so that I will have success. So eventually I will be successful, rather than a mental shift to I am successful. Therefore, I'm going to do successful things and then I will have success. Because you're not chasing it, you are it. Yeah. And so now you're going to be in that state of being and then execute accordingly. What a more satisfying way to live rather than chasing it and allowing the world to let you know whether you are it or not. I don't want to give anybody else that much control over myself. I want to decide who I am on my own, which is what you said. I think that's brilliant.
Ben, I'm chuckling because you talked about we're human beings, not human doings. I'm looking at a book right now in front of me. It's called A Shift in Being. It's about practicing coaching called ontological coaching. It's about transformational coaching. Sometimes we can coach people through an issue. Like I can coach my kid in throwing a baseball, for example, right? And that's an appropriate transactional form of coaching. But transformational is not about solving that problem as much as it is about helping that person understand how to solve that problem themselves as they start to encounter these things. The example I used about taking that VP and allowing that VP to craft the PD was using a transactional activity to affect a transformational change in that individual's perspective. It goes back to what we were talking about before. You have to be curious about to understand what's that button that I can push. I'm less about wanting to direct people to do things and more about wanting to inspire them to do it.
We talk a lot about the difference between coaching, mentorship, and consulting. A mentor really only shares their personal experiences.
Mm-hmm.
A coach asks questions to guide people to their own answers. And then a consultant provides solutions.
Yep.
I'm finding as I work more with CEOs, they really don't want consultants because they don't like being told what to do.
Yep.
So they don't really want the solution. And maybe in some edges of they say, okay, yep, that's what I want, go attack it. They may want a little bit of intel about the solution, but for the most part, they want you to talk to them in results language, not solution language, not the flux capacitor needs to be fluxier. They don't want to hear about that. They just want to know, when am I going to be able to travel back in time?
So Ben, you just hit on the point that I think has helped me both in C-suites and boardrooms. I don't go into a C-suite or a boardroom trying to speak engineer, architect, or whatever. I'm trying to speak the language of the business. That's why I use that framework of governance, processes, and workforce, because as I'm talking in those environments, I'm linking them to issues that they're much more aware of. I can talk about a building requirement or engineering requirement in those terms without getting into the discussion of flux capacitor. The coaching I do with a lot of engineers is like, nobody in there really wants to know what a flux capacitor is. And if you bring that subject up and there's somebody in there that is deeply interested, all of a sudden your meeting and your subject just got hijacked. Just be very intentional about the communications and how you want to communicate. And I think the other thing that really helps is just being somewhat concise in what you're trying to articulate. Give the executive what they need, not anymore, and give them the gift of time back.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Yeah. Brief and brilliant is what we started to coin. What was your first job? So for me, it was a paper route. That's how I made my first buck. What was it for you?
Had a paper route. I threw the San Mateo Times. I think I started when I was probably 11 years old. Graduated to the San Francisco Chronicle and a Sunday newspaper. And delivering those Sunday newspaper stuff.
Yep. All loaded with all the advertisements for the folks who've never done it before. Yeah, we were doing rucking before rucking was a thing.
Absolutely.
What toy or hobby did you have as a child that inspired what you do career-wise today?
If you were to spring down on me when I was a little kid, I was probably playing with Lego blocks. They'd just been invented then. Lincoln Logs and the whole thing. Our conversation with my dad, I must have been about 6 or 7. He asked what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I just told him I wanted to build stuff. He asked, what do you want to build? Buildings. I think you want to be an architect. That pretty much became the theme of my early childhood, from playing with blocks and things. My art project in 6th grade was a mixed use development. How many 6th graders do that? I didn't even understand that was a thing. But eventually I found some mentors, some great coaches. I shifted from wanting to be an architect to an engineer. Supposed to be more stable, more financially stable. But I think along the way, we just made the great choices. I think the best career decision I made, or academic decision I made, was to not only transition from architecture to civil engineering, but then ultimately to transfer into industrial engineering, because I believe that a lot of the issues that we face in corporate globally really deal with systems and how systems come together to deliver good product and services.
Cool. What was your favorite and least favorite course in school?
Probably the most important course was creative writing. I was a senior in high school, realized I completed all of my English requirements to get into a university, but I'd accidentally taken a creative writing course, and the teacher would not let me drop the course. Probably my least fun course, but the most impactful for me right now. I enjoyed math. I wasn't super good at it, and I had to work to get good at it, but there was just something about math that got my juices flowing.
What quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent-free?
Oh my gosh, there are a lot of quotes. I'm thinking of one by Winston Churchill. It essentially goes, the pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. The optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. It's something that keeps me grounded when I run into challenging situations. Am I coming at it as a pessimist or an optimist? Particularly if you're leading teams, you almost have to be an optimist. You have to give the team hope.
Pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, and an opportunist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Love that. What do you think the greatest invention or discovery was in the past 300 years?
The past 300 years moving into, it's no specific invention, like an industrial revolution, moving to a place where we could produce products at scale. And so there's a book by Jared Diamond called Guns, Germs, and Steel, and it really chronicles the evolution of society and civilization from the early times. When you get to the Industrial Revolution, it was the place where we could actually create a truly vibrant middle class. I believe that the advent of folks like Henry Ford, being able to make products seemingly were out of reach for the common man, affordable for the common man, enabled the economic vitality that we have in the United States today and the global leadership that we have as an economy today.
If people like what you've shared today, how should they connect with you?
They can go to my LinkedIn profile, and if they go to my LinkedIn profile, they'll see a tremendous volume of content posted on leadership development, organizational development. I think the three pillars I really focus on are healthcare and infrastructure in general, more broadly, sustainability. But my core passion, helping people achieve their dreams and their aspirations. So a lot of leadership development, coaching, a lot of things that we were talking about today. You'll find those posted there. If you need a coach, I'm not looking to do coaching as a full-time type of gig, but it's just something that sort of ignites me. It's just something that I'd rather build people than buildings, quite frankly.
Awesome. Yeah. It was great having you. My grandfather was a CV. My dad was in the Navy. He was on the ground crew for the Blue Angels for quite some time. So it was great to speak to you, and I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for being with me today.
Thanks so much, Ben.